The Galactic Council had seen many things in its 14,000 cycles of existence, but never, and I mean never, had they been so thoroughly embarrassingly wrong about a species as they were about humans. Let me back up a bit. My name is Vex'tharan, senior xenobiologist for the Interstellar Assessment Bureau. And yes, before you ask, I was one of the idiots who signed off on the initial human classification report. The one that labeled them mild-mannered resource gatherers with minimal threat potential. The one that suggested integrating them into the Council's educational exchange program without so much as a psychological screening. Gods! We were fools. It started innocently enough, a simple cultural exchange initiative, designed to foster understanding between species. 12 human students, all adolescents between their 15th and 18th cycles, were selected to attend the prestigious Korvax Academy on Theta Prime. The academy catered to the intellectual elite from 47 different civilizations, and the humans were placed in standard threat assessment and response. Basically a class teaching young beings how to evaluate and react to dangerous situations in space. The instructor was a Vorlian named Thekmor, 6 limbs of military precision and tactical genius, decorated veteran of 3 border conflicts. He'd been teaching for 20 cycles and he thought he'd seen everything. He hadn't seen humans. On the first day, the Commor decided to run what we call the Predator Simulation, a holographic scenario where students face an apex predator from an unknown world and must assess threat levels and survival strategies. It's meant to be terrifying. Most students freeze, panic, or flee immediately. That's the point. You learn by confronting your fear in a safe environment. The Cammor selected a nightmare from the Kaldrock's abyss, a shadow stalker with venomous attendages and optical camouflage. The thing had caused actual fatalities in real encounters. The hologram activated, and the creature materialized in the center of the classroom, hissing, its form flickering between visibility and transparency. The non-human students did exactly what Thekmor expected. They scattered, some diving under desks, others pressing themselves against walls, a few of the braver ones grabbing improvised weapons. Standard survival responses. The humans? Oh, the humans did something else entirely. A girl named Yuki, small thing, couldn't have weighed more than 50 kilograms, actually laughed. Laughed? She turned to the boy next to her, someone called Omar, and said, "Dude, it's like a mantis shrimp had a baby with a chameleon." Omar grinned, and I swear on my ancestral void tombs, he grinned at a creature that could theoretically disembowel him. Yeah, but did you see those joints? Bet I could trip it if I went low. Before the Quamar could even process what was happening, another human Priya, according to the records, had circled behind the hologram, examining it from different angles. "The camouflage only works from the front," she called out. "There's like a 2-second delay when it moves, and then, gods help us all." They started coordinating. A lanky human named Kenji pulled off his jacket. "Distraction," he announced, and threw it at the creature's face. The hologram reacted, slashing at the fabric, and in that moment, Omar actually did go low, sliding across the floor in a move that would have made any soldier proud. A human called Amara was suddenly on a desk, having climbed there in absolute silence, positioning herself above the creature's blind spot. The Kumor stood frozen, his teaching algorithm completely shattered. Within 90 seconds, the humans had the holographic predator surrounded, flanked, and were actively discussing which approach would work best for a kill. "Cut the simulation," Thekmor finally managed, his translator struggling with the tremor in his voice. The humans stopped, looking almost disappointed. "But we almost had it figured out," Yuki protested. "Figured out?" Kamur's voice climbed 2 octaves. "That was a Kaldrock's shadow stalker. You were supposed to demonstrate survival assessment, not tactical assault coordination." A human named Dimitri, built like a cargo hauler, shrugged those massive shoulders. "I mean, yeah, but the best survival strategy is usually eliminating the threat, right? That's what we were assessing." The other students, Vilaraxians, Thrin, even a Korvaxian youth, stared at the humans like they'd just watched someone casually disarm a fusion reactor with their teeth. The Commor sent an emergency report to the Bureau that evening. I received it at 0300 station time, and honestly thought he was having some kind of breakdown. They treated an apex predator scenario like a team-building exercise, he'd written. They were enjoying it, but here's where it gets truly disturbing. The Commodore, being a veteran, decided this was an anomaly. Maybe they just didn't understand the danger because it was a hologram. So, the next week, he escalated. He introduced them to the scenario garden, a controlled but physical environment where real, non-lethal but genuinely dangerous organisms are released. Think of it as exposure therapy for space travel. Most students complete one scenario per semester, and even that leaves them traumatized enough to need counseling. The humans requested to go every day, every single day. A human girl named Sade actually started keeping a journal, rating the creatures on what she called a terror-to-coolness ratio. She gave the Reckon's spine worm a 6 out of 10 because it was scary, but kind of repetitive in its attack patterns. Omar began studying xenobiology in his free time, not for academic credit, but because, and I quote, "I want to know where their weak points are." Kenji started a betting pool on which human could get closest to each creature without triggering an attack response. And Yuki, sweet tiny Yuki, who looked like she couldn't hurt a hoverfly, successfully intimidated a Drexian cave bear by maintaining eye contact and making herself appear larger. A Drexian cave bear. These things have been known to tear through reinforced hull plating when agitated. She made it back down. By week 4, the non-human students had stopped attending the scenario garden entirely. Not because they were falling behind, because watching the humans was more terrifying than the actual creatures. They don't have a fear response, a Thrin student told me during my investigation interview, her chromatophores flashing distress colors. Or if they do, it makes them more dangerous, not less. I had to see this for myself. I arrived at the academy during week 6, just as Thakmor was preparing what he called the final assessment, a scenario designed to be absolutely, unequivocally impossible. A situation where the only rational response was retreat and emergency beacon activation. He was going to strand them in a simulation of a deteriorating space station with failing life support, hostile automated defenses, and a cascading structural collapse. The goal wasn't survival. It was how quickly they could recognize the need for evacuation and call for help. 12 human teenagers entered that simulation. The timer started. The station's alarms began blaring. Oxygen indicators showed critical depletion in 15 minutes. Defense turrets activated, targeting anyone in the corridors. Structural supports started failing with ominous groaning sounds that would make anyone with functional survival instincts run for the escape pods. The humans held a conference. Right there, in the middle of the deteriorating station, they actually took 30 seconds to discuss options. Amara, you're fastest. Can you get to environmental controls? If Dimitri clears the turrets. Yeah. Omar, Priya, think you can stabilize the main support column long enough for us to reroute power? Probably. But we'd need a distraction for the defense grid. I know. Kenji, Sade, you're up. I watched through the observation dome as these adolescents, these children by human standards, split into coordinated teams and began systematically solving an unsolvable scenario. Dimitri didn't just avoid the defense turrets, he studied their tracking patterns for 20 seconds, then walked through their firing solutions using timing alone, mapping safe paths for the others. Kenji and Sade didn't distract the defense grid. They hacked it using nothing but a broken comm panel, and what Sade later described as just basic logic and some trial and error. Amara reached environmental controls with 4 minutes of oxygen remaining, and managed to reroute emergency reserves from the escape pod systems, a solution that wasn't even programmed into the simulation as possible. And Omar and Priya, those magnificent, terrifying problem solvers, didn't stabilize the support column. They collapsed it strategically, bringing down a section of the station to seal off the cascade failure, sacrificing one zone to save the rest. When the simulation ended, because the humans had beaten it, had survived an impossible scenario and actually improved the station's overall stability. The Commodore just stood there, his 6 limbs hanging limp. They weren't supposed to fight back, he whispered. The station was supposed to be the overwhelming threat. They were supposed to run. A human named Lucas, who'd been coordinating communications throughout the scenario, looked genuinely confused. But why would we run? We had time to fix it. 4 minutes of oxygen. Right. But that's like 4 whole minutes. That's plenty of time if you don't panic. That moment, that single, casual dismissal of what every other species would consider absolute catastrophic crisis, was when I finally understood what we'd done. We hadn't invited students to our academy. We'd invited predators to a petting zoo. Let me explain something about galactic civilization. The Council species, all 47 of us, evolved on relatively stable worlds with predictable threats. The Vorlians had tough hides and social structures to defend against their planet's megafauna. The Thren developed camouflage and communal hibernation to survive resource scarcity. The Valoraxians grew radiation resistance for their sun's frequent flares. We all developed one specific adaptation to survive one specific challenge. Humans didn't do that. See, I started digging into Earth's history after the station incident, because I needed to understand what kind of evolutionary nightmare produces a species that treats mortal danger like a puzzle to solve. And what I found still gives me what humans would call the creeps. Earth didn't have one challenge. It had all of them, simultaneously. For millions of cycles, predators. Earth had apex hunters that could outrun, outclimb, and outswim proto-humans. So humans learned to outthink them, developing cooperative hunting strategies and weapons. Scarcity. Earth went through dozens of climate fluctuations, ice ages, droughts, floods. So humans learned to adapt to literally every environment on their planet, from frozen wastelands to baking deserts to dense jungles. Disease? Don't even get me started on Earth's microscopic nightmare ecosystem. Humans developed immune systems so aggressive, they sometimes attack their own bodies just to stay in practice. But here's the thing that still makes my respiratory organs seize up. Humans didn't just survive these challenges, they got bored with them. So they invented new ones. I found historical records of humans deliberately climbing mountains that killed them, diving to ocean depths that crushed them, launching Zaunch into space in primitive metal cylinders that exploded regularly, splitting atoms despite knowing it could chain react and destroy their entire species. They have a category of recreational activities called extreme sports, whose entire purpose is to simulate mortal danger closely enough to trigger their fear response, because they enjoy the sensation. They jump out of aircraft for fun. They tie elastics to their ankles and leap off bridges. They invented something called free solo climbing, where the whole point is removing all safety equipment to make it more terrifying. I compiled this research and presented it to the Council with one conclusion. We had fundamentally misunderstood what humans. They aren't resource gatherers who became intelligent. They're persistent predators who never stopped hunting, even after they ran out of prey challenging enough to satisfy them. So they started hunting everything else. Knowledge, experiences, their own limitations, the universe itself. But the Council, in their infinite bureaucratic wisdom, decided my assessment was alarmist and anthropodically biased. The human students were performing excellently, causing no actual harm, and the exchange program would continue. They sent me back to the academy to observe and recalibrate my threat assessment parameters. Fine, I would observe. Week 8, the Commore introduced a new module, Ethical Crisis Management. The scenario was designed to create moral paralysis, a situation where every choice led to suffering, forcing students to grapple with the psychological weight of command decisions. The setup: a rescue scenario where the students commanded a damaged ship with limited resources, encountering 3 distress signals, one from a medical transport with critical patients, one from a research station with valuable data on a plague outbreak, and one from a colony ship full of civilians. They could only save one before their ship's life support failed completely. Each choice meant condemning the others to death. It's a classic, no-win scenario designed to teach students that sometimes leadership means living with tragedy, accepting loss, and making peace with imperfect choices. The non-human students spent hours agonizing over the decision. Some chose the medical transport to save the most lives immediately. Others picked the research station, arguing the plague data could save millions eventually. A few selected the colony ship, unable to abandon civilians. All of them looked haunted afterward, even knowing it was a simulation. Then the humans took their turn. They spent 15 minutes analyzing the scenario in that rapid-fire collaborative way they had, throwing ideas back and forth so quickly. The translators struggled to keep up. Okay, but why can't we? Because the power grid is fried. Yeah, but what if we cannibalize the weapon systems? Would that give us enough? Maybe. Or we could vent atmosphere from the cargo bays to extend. Wait. The research station has experimental engines, right? What if? The Commodore interrupted. The parameters are fixed. You have 3 choices. Choose one. A human named Rashid, who'd been quiet until now, looked up from the console. With respect, Professor, the parameters are only fixed if we accept them. We're rejecting the premise. You cannot reject. Watch us, Yuki interjected, and her smile was absolutely feral. What happened next was like watching a precision military operation conducted by caffeinated chaos elementals. They diverted power from weapons, shields, and non-essential systems. They vented cargo bay atmosphere to create urgency thrust. They had Amara calculate a slingshot trajectory using the nearest planet's gravity well. They sent Dimitri's team to physically reconfigure the cargo transporters into makeshift life support pods. And when the Commodore insisted the research station's experimental engines were too unstable to salvage, Omar looked him dead in the eyes and said, "Yeah, that's why it's perfect. Unstable means energetic. We just need to control the instability." They saved all 3 ships. It took them 2 hours of simulated time, improvised engineering, that violated 15 safety protocols, and a maneuver that Amara cheerfully admitted had a maybe 60% chance of killing everyone. But they saved all 3. The Commodore filed his resignation that night. I didn't blame him. I was ready to resign too, except I couldn't stop watching these beautiful, terrifying creatures problem-solve their way through reality itself. The final incident happened during week 12, the last week of the semester. There was no official class scheduled. It was meant to be a reflection period. But Priya approached me in my temporary office, and she had that look humans get when they're about to suggest something that will either revolutionize galactic civilization or end it. "Dr. Vex'tharan," she said, "we've been talking, and we have a question about the Korvax exclusion zone." My secondary heart stopped. The Korvax exclusion zone was a region of space around a collapsed neutron star where gravitational anomalies, radiation bursts, and spatial distortions made travel impossible. Ships that entered never returned. It had been sealed off for 3,000 cycles. "That zone is forbidden," I managed. "Absolutely forbidden, right? But why hasn't anyone tried to study it recently? Your records are all ancient. We have better sensors now, better shields, better understanding of physics. Because it's a death trap." Or Kenji chimed in, "When had he arrived? It's a treasure trove of scientific data that everyone's too scared to collect." "We could go," Omar added casually, as if suggesting a trip to the recreation dome. "Just a quick survey, get some readings, expand council knowledge." I stared at them. "You want to voluntarily enter the most dangerous region in council space for science?" "Well, yeah," Sade said. "Also, it sounds cool. When else are we gonna get a chance to see a neutron star up close?" They had a plan. Of course they had a plan. They'd been working on it for weeks, coordinating with human engineers back on Earth, consulting with their homeworld's top physicists, designing shield modifications and sensor arrays. They weren't asking for permission. They were informing me of their intention and offering me the chance to make it official. I should have said no. I should have invoked every regulation, called security, locked them in their dormitories. But here's the thing about humans that I'd learned over those 12 weeks. They were going to do it anyway. With or without approval, with or without safety measures, they would find a way. So, I did the only logical thing. I went with them. The expedition took 3 days. We used a retrofitted human exploration vessel, because, and I still can't believe I'm saying this, human ships are apparently designed with the assumption that everything will go wrong constantly. And things did go wrong. The gravitational shears were worse than predicted. Radiation spiked to levels that should have fried our sensors. Spatial distortions created navigation nightmares. The humans called it a bit spicy and adjusted in real time. Yuki recalibrated shields on the fly. Dmitri manually piloted through distortions that our AI couldn't process. Omar and Priya rewrote the sensor algorithms mid-mission to account for the gravitational lensing. And what we found? We discovered that the neutron star was emitting a form of radiation that could revolutionize faster-than-light travel. We mapped gravitational patterns that explained anomalies in 17 other systems. We collected data that would advance Council astrophysics by decades. All because 12 human children looked at a forbidden zone and thought, but what if we just tried? When we returned to Theta Prime, the Council was waiting. I thought we'd be arrested, expelled, possibly executed for violating the exclusion zone protocols. Instead, we were honored. The data we'd collected was too valuable, too revolutionary. The Council couldn't punish us without admitting they'd been too afraid to do what a dozen human adolescents accomplished in 3 days. At the ceremony, the Council overseer asked me to update my original human assessment report. I submitted one sentence: humans do not ask if something is possible. They assume it is and work backward to figure out how. The overseer read it 3 times, then looked at me with something that might have been fear or might have been awe. Should we be concerned? She asked. I thought about Yuki laughing at a holographic predator. Omar planning strategic weaknesses like he was discussing lunch. Priya circling death traps, looking for angles. All of them treating impossible challenges like interesting problems. Yes, I said, but not because they're hostile. Then why? Because one day, they're going to look at something fundamental, physics, mortality, entropy itself, and decide it's negotiable. And honestly, I think they'll win that argument. The humans graduated with highest honors. They returned to Earth as heroes, and the Council quietly began integrating human problem-solving approaches into military and exploration training. The Commodore eventually came out of retirement to teach a new course, Applied Human-Style Threat Response. It's the most popular class in the Academy. As for me, I'm still studying them. Still trying to understand this species that treats fear as a starting point, rather than a stopping point. And sometimes, late at night station time, I wonder what they'll tackle next. Then, I remember Yuki's words during that first Predator simulation, when she was supposed to be terrified, but was analyzing. It's only scary until you understand it. Then it's just interesting. That's what humans are, really. A species that looked at a universe designed to be terrifying and decided it was interesting instead. The galaxy will never be the same. And honestly, I think that's a good thing, even if it does keep me up at night.